Pop quiz. If you cross a pure tall pea plant with a pure short pea plant, what do all the first generation plants look like? Medium, all tall, all short, or a mix? Lock in your answer. Time's up. The first generation is all tall. That result sets up the real question. How can every plant look tall if one parent was short? In this video, we'll walk through the mystery that Gregor Mendel solved with pea plants. Why traits don't blend and how a trait can seem to disappear in one generation, but show up again in the next. To solve that mystery, Mendel needed a setup with traits that were easy to track. He chose pea plants because their traits were clear either-or options, tall versus short, purple versus white flowers, or round versus wrinkled seeds. That made patterns easier to spot. First, Mendel made sure his parent plants were pure, meaning they reliably produced the same trait when they self-pollinated. Pure tall plants produced only tall offspring. On the other hand, pure short plants produced only short offspring. Next, he crossed the two plants by moving pollen from one plant to the other. Then, he planted the seeds and observed what the first generation offspring looked like. And that's exactly what Mendel observed. The first generation, called the F1 generation, was all tall. Not medium, not mixed, every plant looked tall. So did the short trait vanish? Not exactly. Mendel realized the trait could still be present, even if it wasn't visible. His big insight was that traits come in pairs of instructions, one from each parent, and sometimes one instruction can mask the other in the organism's appearance. The instruction that shows up is called dominant, and the one that can be masked is called recessive. In this cross, tall acted dominant and short acted recessive. To test whether the short trait was truly gone, Mendel took those tall-looking F1 plants and allowed them to self-pollinate. This produced the second generation, called F2, and this is where things got really interesting. In the F2 generation, the short plants returned, and when Mendel counted the results, he found a consistent pattern, about 3 tall plants for every 1 short plant, a 3-to-1 ratio. That 3-to-1 pattern is the clue that traits don't blend. If traits mixed like paint, you'd expect lots of medium-height plants. Instead, Mendel saw tall and short showing up in predictable proportions. To cement the idea, Mendel repeated the experiment with a different trait, seed shape. When he crossed pure round seeds with pure wrinkled seeds, the F1 seeds were all round. Then, when those F1 plants self-pollinated, wrinkled seeds reappeared in the F2 generation, again in about a 3-to-1 ratio. Here is a quick misconception fix. Recessive doesn't mean gone, and it doesn't necessarily mean rare. It can be common, it's just hidden whenever a dominant instruction is present. So far, we've covered 3 key ideas. Traits don't blend. Dominant traits can mask recessive ones, and a hidden trait often reappears in the second generation in a 3-to-1 pattern. Want to check your progress? Tap the link for a quick practice test and a concise study guide tailored to this lesson. Quiz yourself, skim the highlights, and jump back in. Now let's deepen the idea and explain where that 3-to-1 pattern comes from. The key is that parents don't pass both instructions into a single egg or pollen grain. Instead, each carries just one instruction for that trait. So think of each parent as having 2 options to pass on, 1 tall instruction or 1 short instruction. When the tall F1 plants make the next generation, each parent passes 1 instruction at random. Put those random combinations together and you get 4 possible pairings. over many offspring that produces the classic pattern Mendel counted. Here's the important part. In 3 of those combinations, at least one dominant tall instruction is present. So the plant looks tall. Only one combination has 2 recessive, short instructions together, so the plant looks short. That's the logic behind the 3-to-1 ratio. To see that the pattern isn't just about height, try it with flower color. When Mendel crossed pure purple with pure white, the first generation all looked purple. Then, when the first generation produced the next generation, white flowers reappeared in a smaller fraction, matching the same dominant and recessive pattern. One important note before you apply this everywhere. Not every trait in nature follows this neat pattern. Human eye color, for example, involves multiple genes and doesn't fit a simple 1 dominant and 1 recessive rule. But for Mendel's classic P traits, this model works perfectly, so now you can predict outcomes. If you cross 2 pure parents with different versions of a Mendelian trait, the first generation will all show the dominant version. Then, when those first-generation plants self-pollinate, the recessive version can reappear in the second generation, often about 1/4 of the offspring. To recap, traits don't blend. Each trait comes from paired instructions, and a dominant instruction can mask a recessive one. When the first generation self-pollinates, the recessive trait can return, often in a 3-to-1 pattern. Now that you've watched the video, let's see how much you remember. Head to the link in the description, where you'll find Quizlet content made just for you.